Bible prophecy, the rapture to the Mountain of Olives, the judgment seat of Christ. The concept of the rapture, a swift and decisive event where believers are caught up to meet the Lord, has deep roots in biblical passages such as 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 verses 16 and 17. This catching away is often associated with the Mount of Olives, a location of profound significance in prophetic accounts. Acts chapter 1 and verses 9 to 11 and Zechariah chapter 14 verses 3 and 4 proclaim that Jesus, who ascended from the Mountain of Olives, will return in the same manner. This connection shapes our understanding of the rapture as an important moment closely tied to the very place from which Jesus ascended. In the context of understanding the sequence of events leading up to the rapture, Matthew chapter 24 and verses 29 to 31 serves as a key passage, shedding light on the timing and nature of the significant event, describing the coming of the Son of Man immediately after the Great Tribulation. Matthew chapter 24 provides a post-tribulational framework that is essential for interpreting the unfolding events. Acts chapter 14 and verse 22, the first letter of Peter chapter 4 and verse 17, and 2 Thessalonians chapter 1 verses 3 to 10 further contribute to this account by providing insight into the endurance and refinement of believers during times of tribulation. Acts chapter 14 and verse 22 highlights the concept of entering the kingdom of God through many tribulations, emphasizing the transformative nature of challenges faced by believers. This aligns with the post-tribulational understanding, suggesting that tribulations play a great role in preparing and purifying the faithful. 2 Thessalonians chapter 1 verses 3 to 10 provides a perspective on the righteous judgment of God. The passage emphasizes the relief and rest that will come to the persecuted and afflicted, portraying a just retribution for those who trouble believers. This alignment with a post-tribulational gathering echoes the themes found in Matthew chapter 24 and verse 31, connecting the dots between the tribulation period, the perseverance of believers, and the subsequent divine intervention. The nature of the rapture. At the heart of the discussion lies the interpretation of critical passages, particularly 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 verses 14 to 17, where believers are described as being caught up to meet the Lord. The examination of the Greek word translated as caught up underscores the sudden and forceful nature of the event, without clarifying a particular direction, whether upward or downward. This analysis extends to Acts chapter 8 and verse 39, where the same Greek word is used, translated as snatched away, Philip being snatched away, reinforcing the concept of a swift and decisive removal. In challenging the common perception that the rapture involves an ascent to heaven, it becomes evident that the word for meeting the Lord in the air in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 and verse 17 appears in two other New Testament passages, Matthew chapter 25 and verse 6 and Acts chapter 28 and verse 15. In both instances, it signifies a meeting where people go out to meet a dignitary and then accompany him back to the place from which they came out from. Notably, in Matthew chapter 25 and verse 6, a parable of the second coming, strongly supports the idea that the meeting in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 and verse 17 involves believers rising to meet the Lord and subsequently welcoming him to the earth as a triumphant king. In examining biblical passages such as 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 and verse 17 and the gospel accounts in Matthew chapter 24 and Mark 13, a symbolic depth emerges concerning the significance of the clouds in depicting divine presence and the escort of the angels during these momentous events. The term cloud extends beyond the atmospheric air, symbolizing something profound, the presence of the Elohim or angels. Acts chapter 1 and verse 9 portrays Jesus' departure from the disciples' sight, veiled by a cloud, a symbolic representation of the Elohim or the angels. This imagery sets the stage for the anticipation of Jesus' return, echoed in Revelation chapter 1 and verse 7, Daniel chapter 7 and verse 13, and Matthew chapter 24 and verse 30, where his coming is associated with the clouds, synonymous with divine glory and angelic presence. In Matthew chapter 24 and verse 30, a dramatic account unfolds as the Son of Man is described arriving in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. This portrayal aligns with another reference in Matthew chapter 16 and verse 27, emphasizing the Son of Man's coming in his Father's glory with his angels. These parallel descriptions affirm that the clouds and angels are interchangeable expressions, underscoring their equivalence in the context of the second coming and the judgment seat of Christ. This correlation signifies that the clouds referenced in Matthew chapter 24 and verse 30 and the angels described in Matthew chapter 16 and verse 27 are equivalent expressions. The clouds symbolize the angelic host known as the Elohim. This understanding implies that the Elohim will be accompanying Christ at his second advent and ministering at the judgment seat. Therefore, when Matthew chapter 24 and verse 30 speaks of the Son of Man coming with the clouds, it refers to the presence of the angels, the Elohim. Furthermore, this underlines the important role of the angels or the Elohim in ministering at the judgment seat of Christ. They are portrayed not only as participating in the gathering of the believers, but also as ministers facilitating the judgment process at the seat of Christ. Another symbolic meaning of the word clouds refers to the multitude of true believers. See Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 1. The judgment seat of Christ. The biblical account provides a comprehensive view of the judgment seat of Christ. According to 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 10 and Hebrews chapter 9 and verse 27, the sequence unfolds in stages: death, resurrection, and subsequent judgment, then immortality. The righteous and the unfaithful face distinct outcomes. However, it's critical to note that until after the judgment seat of Christ, the dead are raised with a mortal nature, as highlighted in Daniel chapter 12 and 1 Corinthians chapter 15. This mortal state is transformed into immortality thereafter. The promise of rewards for the righteous is yet to be fulfilled, as Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 39 and 40 emphasizes. Thus the rewards are anticipated at the time of the resurrection and judgment seat of Christ, when believers will attain immortality. It's at this point that the righteous are bestowed with immortality, while the unfaithful face the prospect of being cast into Gehenna, depicting the seriousness and gravity of the judgment. Gehenna, a literal place of judgment. Gehenna, known as Hellfire, is the literal valley of Hinnom, a place associated with the destruction of the wicked. This raises questions about the location of the judgment seat of Christ. The proximity of Gehenna to Jerusalem, specifically east of the city, suggests a connection between the judgment seat of Christ and Jerusalem. Psalm 133 and verse 3 and Psalm 87 and verse 5 further support Zion as the location of judgment, emphasizing the significance of this place in the saints' reward and rebirth. Jeremiah's prophetic insights. Jeremiah's prophetic accounts in chapter 7 and verse 31 and chapter 19 verses 11 to 13 shed light on moments of divine disapproval and foretell the eventual destruction of Jerusalem and its temple. The prophecy in Jeremiah chapter 19 verses 2 to 6 predicts the ruin brought by the Babylonians and later the Romans in 70 AD. This historical context connects with Jesus' reference to Gehenna, portraying it as a place of final reckoning and divine justice, with implications reaching beyond the events of 70 AD. The connection between Gehenna and Jerusalem gains depth as we consider Jesus' prophecies of judgment in Matthew chapter 23 to 25, with a dual fulfilment encompassing both the events of 70 AD and a profound latter-day reckoning. The parable of the wheat and tares, Matthew chapter 13 verses 24 to 30. The parable of the wheat and tares introduces elements strongly suggesting a latter-day application, particularly in the context of the second coming and judgment. The symbolism of the harvest, the end of the age, angels gathering the responsible, and the association with Gehenna underscores a connection to the events surrounding the return of Christ and the final judgment. The harvest. The reference to the harvest, Matthew chapter 13 and verse 39, is a figure used in other passages concerning the Lord's return, such as Isaiah chapter 18 and verses 4 and 5, Joel chapter 3 and verse 13, Mark chapter 4 and verse 29, and Revelation chapter 14 and verse 15. This suggests a connection to the events of the second coming. The end of the age. The mention of the end of the age, Matthew chapter 13 and verse 39, aligns with the concept of the end of times and the return of Christ. Angels gathering the responsible. The idea of angels gathering the responsible, Matthew chapter 13 and verses 39 and 40, is also repeated in Matthew chapter 25 and verses 31 and 33, and other passages that I've already mentioned in this study. In the context of the second coming, further supporting a latter-day application, Matthew chapter 25 verses 31 to 34, the throne of glory. Matthew chapter 25 verses 31 to 34 details the separation of the sheep and goats at the same place as Christ's throne of glory. This aligns with arguments asserting the throne of Christ and David's rightful place in Jerusalem, emphasizing its significance in the location of judgment. The judgment seat of Christ will take place at Jerusalem. A furnace of fire. Gehenna. The reference to a furnace of fire, Matthew chapter 13 and verse 42, which is associated with Gehenna, aligns with the concept of judgment and the fate of the wicked. The phrase, the wailing and gnashing of teeth, Matthew chapter 13 and verse 42, is used in other passages concerning the fate of the rejected at the judgment seat. See Matthew chapter 8 and verse 12, Matthew chapter 22 and verse 13, chapter 24 and verse 51. This connects the parable to the judgment of the wicked. As I've said before, Zion or Jerusalem is the place of reward and judgment. See Psalm 133 and verse 3 and Psalm 87 and verse 5 highlight Zion as the location of judgment, portraying it as the scene of the saints' reward and rebirth. The metaphorical birth of the Lord's people in Zion, coupled with the imagery of Jerusalem as their mother, aligns with biblical themes of rebirth and spiritual regeneration. And finally, it does say, in the regeneration, they will sit down judging the 12 tribes of Israel. The 12 apostles will be with Jesus.